is your host, Mitchell J. Rabin, and we're very glad you're joining us again today. Today we're going to have another very interesting show. We invited Don Hanson, who is an internationally known healer, to be with us. Don does some very interesting and important work in dealing with people's ancestry and going back and looking at the lineages of people, of his clients, and working with them in such a way as to help his clients let go of and release the patterns that have held them in place virtually, you could say, for generations, psychogenetically. And by working on that level, he has seen, his clients have seen, rather remarkable results in their lives. Old patterns disappearing, vanishing, things that they didn't even know was passed on to them from the past. And voila, they seem to disappear, and Don just brings a very rich level of experience of his own to the foreground, and as a result, his clients are very well healed. Now, Don is traveling around the world these days, doing a lot of lecturing and running workshops where people en masse, en group, can get the benefit of this kind of inquiry and this kind of looking at themselves and releasing those patterns that they don't feel they really want there in their lives anymore. So we're very glad to have you, Don.
Thank you, Mitchell. It's really nice to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad.
So am I.
Yeah. Now, kind of inspired you to get into this in the very first place?
Well, back in 1971, I was on a submarine during the Vietnam War. And so I came back and somewhat confused and lost and went to college.
It was a problem because you didn't know how to swim.
Well, that's true, but I did, though. I needed to, actually.
You bet.
It's part of our training on being on a submarine is to know how to swim.
Sure. Wow.
And so I came back and went to school for a couple years, and I ended up getting in a very serious car wreck in 1972. And I ended up in the hospital for 7 weeks, and I was in a coma for a week, actually. And I woke up from the coma, and the first thing that came to my life was, I know why I'm alive now, and that's to live life. And I'd realized I had been raised to die life, and it would be natural at 22 that I would get in this very serious car accident and almost die. And so
when you say you were taught to die life, what do you mean by that?
Well, the belief systems, the behavior patterns, the religious programming that I grew up through, you know, the right and wrong, the good and the bad, the judgments, the prejudice, the fear, you know, the separation process, the anger that a lot of us are raised up in our families in this country.
Very much so.
And it was, you know, it was back in the 60s and, you know, early 70s, and so there was a major revelation going on in the country anyway. And so I had my own thank God, you know, and it opened a lot of us up to
For sure.
whole new possibilities
Exactly.
and new realities.
Yeah.
And so after this car accident and realizing that now I know what my purpose in life is about, is to go out and learn what it means to live life fully. So I started on the quest of self-realization, self-actualization, personal growth. And I found some very good teachers. And one of my first teachers I was with for 4 years, he was a very famous psychiatrist in British Columbia, and he had so much love coming out of him that I just used him as a teacher and a mentor to love myself.
Yeah.
I just immersed myself in his energy until I felt that kind of love that this man was emanating.
And what's his name?
Bennett Wong. He's in British Columbia. He has a gross haven by the sea, it's called.
I see.
Brilliant man.
Beautiful.
And so on my journey, you know, I tried out many things in the 70s. I became a psychotherapist, trained in that for 10 years. And then in 1981, I was in a PhD program in transpersonal psychology, studying what it means to live life. Yeah. And I met a woman in Tiburon. Actually, I had a dream one night, and then a week later I met this woman. And in this dream I was sharing with a friend of mine the next day, an energy broke loose in my body and went on for about a half hour, an hour, and I was just, tears are streaming out of my eyes. And it was like I was tingling from head to toe. It's like I'd stuck my thumb in a light socket, and the energy just released something in me. It started to release the deep-seated programming. And this is after 10 years of working on myself through body therapies and acupuncture. But finally something broke loose on its own. And I found this teacher in Tiburon, and I spent the next
I get
6
this image, Don, of like the Arctic Circle and the ice around it, and the time it takes for some big section of ice to loosen up.
Yes.
You don't see it on the surface at all.
No.
But underneath,
Yes.
the warmth is loosening.
Yes,
and then
it
all of a
is.
sudden, breaks.
It does. And it finally broke. And after 10 or 12 years of constant working on myself. And it took that long. And it takes that long for a lot of us, and for a lot of us not to be impatient with our transformation process, because it's a lifelong process, really. It's a process of awakening, and there's many layers and many levels, as we know.
Exactly. And many layers of awakening as well.
Yes, totally. So to be very patient and be like the slow horse climbing the mountain, and with placing the right foot in the right part of the path on the way up, rather than the horse that runs up too fast that can fall and trip and hurt itself.
Exactly.
It's better to take our time.
Better to plod.
Better to plod sometimes.
Yeah.
And so anyway, this energy broke loose, and then I discovered this woman who had this similar experience 10 years earlier, and so I spent the next 6.5 years with her, and I went through a whole purification process. I left the field of psychotherapy, became a carpenter myself, and what I had discovered was God.
It's an interesting image. I became a carpenter and discovered myself. There's a story of another carpenter in our history.
Isn't that interesting?
Well, please go on.
And what I discovered was that the energy really was pure consciousness. It was God's light. It comes from the heart of God. And so I started to learn to develop a love affair with the Great Spirit. And that love affair grew. I actively pursued it. I pretended like I had a best friend in the world, and my best friend was the Great Spirit, God. And I realized that inside of me...
There's no need to pretend.
Yeah,
anyway,
that's true, And I realized inside of me that God had placed a divine self. And my divine self was really the mirror image of the divine love affair. And so I began to have a relationship with my own divine self. And the deeper I went into divine self, rather than selfish self, me, I learned to get out of my own way and open up to divine self. Miracles started to take place, and this whole energy opened up in my life, in my body, and in everybody around me. So I came back into the world of healing, and I remember I gave out 3 free passes to friends and said, come on, join me here. So we sat down for an hour, and there was so much energy coming through me that they went through a major transformation just sitting in the energy that came through. And one thing led to another, and now I'm traveling in many different countries and working with many different groups over the years. I create a healing circle, and I talk to God, and there's a light that comes through. It just pours through. But in order for that to happen, I had to go through a very deep purification process myself, because my soul came into this world and took on old world mind, which is filled with hundreds and maybe thousands of years of programming that's fear-based, judgment-based, separation-based, prejudice-based, war-based. And I knew that my work, and I recognize now that my work was to take on old world family belief systems, religious programming. Old paradigms, in order to eventually get back to working with the Creator of where we came in the first place, and to work with the Creator in burning up this old world paradigm that our souls take on. And that's really, I see, as our soul work, most of us right now. So we begin to create a rift and a shift in the consciousness of that fear-based, war-based mindset in world mind.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. And another way of describing the phenomenon, although you do it so beautifully, is that we're shifting also from different brain functions to other brain functions.
Yes.
In other words, I mean, it's all mapped physiologically in a sense because
Yes.
our body and brain is so much the mirror image of the divine itself.
It is.
So
It
we're
is.
shifting from a reptilian-based
Yes.
consciousness.
Yes, dinosaur
of
consciousness.
Dinosaur consciousness.
Yes,
of
very
fight
much.
and flight
Yes.
or flight.
Yes.
And of aggression
Mm-hmm.
of that sort
Yes.
to the use of the even beyond the mammalian brain, but into the cerebral cortex, the
Yes.
neocortex,
Mhm.
and the use of reflection, introspection, contemplation, action instead of reaction, or observation,
Yes.
witness, awareness, and consciousness,
Yes.
which gives the space of choice. It's a different way of being, and it's all contained in this whole system. So it sounds like one of the ways of describing your work is to help shift us from the reptilian dinosaur mode
Yes,
to
it is.
these higher level God-given functions.
Yes, it's learning how.
Is that an accurate mapping, if you will?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's learning how to move out of world-mind grid and to take a step up and live
Yeah.
in another vibrational reality.
Yes, exactly.
In my work, what I've noticed in doing very deep cellular molecular transformational work is that we carry the history of the world in our brain and in our nervous system.
And our bodies,
in
our
the
cellular
cells,
life.
the cells of
Oh,
our
yeah,
body.
by all means.
And when divine light comes in, when we can learn to get out of our own way and open up to Spirit, the Great Spirit work with us, that energy comes in and literally shifts the inside of the brain. It releases the memory of the old reptilian dinosaur consciousness, layer after layer after layer. And I've felt it at least 1,000 times myself, maybe more. And each time a layer comes off, and you can feel an explosion take place inside the brain on a cellular molecular level. As the layers let go, one becomes a little higher in one's vision and consciousness. It's a wonderful process to know that we can change our own brain. We can clean out the brainwashing that has been done to us for thousands of years and wash our brain with light and go through that
What
process.
we really need to do, Don, you're highlighting this idea, no pun intended.
Yes.
Is we really need to be brainwashed because we've, in the
Yes.
true sense of washing our brain
Yes.
from all of the stuff, the old belief systems,
Oh.
the dogma, this idea that to win is to kill and victory over instead of victory with.
Yes.
It's an entirely different mode of being.
It is.
And we've been trained, as you so well put it, into this very barbaric and primitive way
Yes.
of being in the 20th and 21st centuries, that people are using guns to settle their matters, is just, it's unbelievable.
Yes, it's not the way we were designed
No,
to be.
not
It's
at
a
all.
complete disharmony of our own divine nature, and takes us away from the way the universe operates. It takes us away from universal law. And our job is to get back to it, to recognize we have been brainwashed, and we still have the brainwashers who've been brainwashed out there are still perpetuating the brainwashing. And for those of us who've chosen to look beyond that now, we will move beyond that. They may need to play that out,
Yeah.
and complete it. But many of us now will be moving way beyond that limited consciousness or that lower mentality.
They know not what they do.
That's the truth.
They just don't know. Now, how
Yes.
would they know? I mean, we've been on this path. We've
Yes.
been looking at ourselves. We've been looking at the nature of the divine. We've been looking at our own nature. We've been looking at nature. We've been,
Yes.
looking at physiology, in fact. And so we're far beyond, far beyond
Yes, we are.
this ordinary ken of old paradigm reality.
Yes.
And so, honestly, among the feeling of anger, I also feel a sense of compassion that they're so asleep.
They
And
know.
actually, you said die consciousness at the beginning. To die
Yes.
life, you said,
Yes,
was an
exactly.
interesting
This
phrase.
is it.
That's it.
This
I mean,
is to die life.
they're living in a destructive pattern and mode,
Yes.
fear-based. So would you say a word about fear and the way you help your clients, in a sense, utilize fear for their own awakening?
They're really fellow travelers on the path as I am. So
Yes.
we're all in the same train heading in the same direction.
Yes.
Some of us have different seats, but we're all heading in the same direction.
That's right. It's interesting because it's a train that moves upward.
Yes, it is.
It's not only horizontal but vertical.
It climbs the mountain, you know. It's a good, strong old steam engine that
Right,
pulls
right.
that up there. Yeah, I see that fear is the foundation of most of our realities and personalities. And as part of the programming that we have been brainwashed with,
Yeah.
is to be afraid of our enemies, to mistrust people. You know, as we've grown up, we've been taught, be careful of the neighbor, be careful of this, be careful of that, be careful of those people in another country, be careful of that other race. So we are, you know, we're taught fear. Our nature's love.
That's right.
And so when we are heaped on top with fear, you know, it's like my religion's the right way and your religion's not. I have a corner on God and you don't. So if you hang out with that person, that's wrong. You know, if you go in that direction, that you're going to face the devil, right? We can talk about the devil too if you want. So what we have to do is recognize that we live in boxes. We live in boxes of fear through religious programming, ancestral history, what country we're from. Most of it's fear-based. And this is what our soul chose to take on in order to transmute. And the way one transmutes that is you have to face fear. And some of the scariest things to do is to let go of our stance in life, go of our reaction, and see if we can get above it and go embrace what we're afraid of. An example of that might be just giving a talk in front of a group of people. It can be kind of scary to get up there in front of 100 people or 200 people and, you know, give a talk. So do we let the fear...
Or in front of thousands.
Or in front of thousands. Do we let the fear hold us back, or do we face the fear and go out there and completely be ourselves and open up? And every time we do that, we start to master our fear and take a step forward. I lived in Hawaii for 7 years, and one of the things I was terrified of was sharks. I loved to snorkel. So somehow I ended up joining a spear fishermen's club with the local Hawaiians, and the next thing I was out swimming with sharks. And in the next 7 years, I mastered my fear of swimming with sharks. I began to like them. You know, we'd be out there catching our dinner, and the next thing we'd have 2 or 3 sharks around us.
Wow.
And, you know, out in very remote places in the islands.
Wow.
And so I learned to face my fear and conquer it and become even bigger than the shark, in a sense. So sharks would come and I'd go chase them, you know, and chase them away. And so that's the kind of
role
thing.
Reversal.
That's the kind of thing. Yes, it is. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about, is facing our fear, not running away, not saying I'm afraid, I'm not going to go there, but going there anyway and taking a risk. And so we begin to unlock the box and our world becomes bigger. Our consciousness expands.
So what happens with your clients when you work with them in the way that you work with them?
What I do is...
Could you just tell us maybe
Yeah.
a story or two of some of the work that you've done and the flowering of people you've worked with through the process that you've led them through?
Yes. Usually when I work with a client, we sit down across from each other and I talk to the Great Spirit, because it all comes from the Great Spirit. All
Though
the
you do a
healing.
lot on the phone as well.
I do. Most of my work is
Yeah.
you know, on the phone sessions. And we talk to the Great Spirit. And so usually what my job is I like people to make a connection with the Great Spirit, because so they don't have to go through me. They can have a direct connection with God and take it any place they want. So they become their own healer and their own therapist. So when we sit down, I say, follow me in words. Let's try it just for a second. Would you follow me in words,
Yes.
Mitchell? Divine and precious Spirit,
Divine and precious Spirit,
my lover,
my lover,
I ask that you bring through divine energy,
I ask that you bring through divine energy
coming from the heart of God,
coming from the heart of God
into my body,
into my body,
into my cells.
into my cells.
And I want you to expose and source out
And I want you to expose and source out
fear
fear
that I'm carrying subconsciously
that I am carrying subconsciously
in my muscles, my bones,
in my muscles and bones,
brain and nervous system.
brain and nervous system.
Everything that I've inherited
Everything everything that I have inherited
from my ancestors,
from my ancestors,
from world mind,
from world mind,
since I came into this planet.
since I came to this planet.
I want you, Great Spirit, to expose.
I want you, Great Spirit, to expose.
You know where it is.
You know where it is.
Unlock it in me.
Unlock it in me.
Bring it out in the open.
Bring it out in the open.
And shine light through it.
And shine light through it.
Every last thread of it.
Every last thread of it.
So I feel it.
So I feel it.
Shine light through it.
Shine light through it.
Burn it out in me.
Burn it out in me.
In the name of the great Holy Spirit.
In the name of the great Holy Spirit.
Coming from the heart of God.
Coming from the heart of God.
Now.
Now.
And so let's just watch for a minute.
Throughout that whole thing, I was feeling sensation.
Yeah.
Especially for whatever reason in my arms.
Yes, that there's something releasing there.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, we all carry the history of the world, and part of our process to undo the layers, like an onion, you keep unlocking and unpeeling it. So when we ask the Great Spirit for something, we give it a couple minutes, and then that energy comes through, and it comes through every time it will bring out that particular layer.
When I did the session with you on the telephone, I also was in a very altered state.
Mm-hmm.
If
Yes.
you recall,
Yes.
I felt that you had led me
Mm-hmm.
to a place that myself,
Yes.
it's not God outside or some notion of
No.
Great Spirit external at
No.
all, but my own real self.
Yes. Which is a very beautiful self.
Yeah.
See, what we're doing is we're taking off the cloak of world mind that's cloaked our divine nature off our divine self. And we are so lucky now, Mitchell, to have the Great Spirit, the light of God, and such easy access to it. We can burn this cloak off effortlessly and very quickly now, where it would have taken us 20 years, 15 years ago.
Yes.
Now the light that's coming through for those who are willing to face it and face themselves and face their own feelings and face their fears and face their mistrust, because sometimes when the light comes through and pushes this stuff out, you're going to feel it. Oftentimes when I do a group or a private session, people will start to walk into the energy field. You know, and a half hour or an hour before they come, all their stuff starts pushing up. And then they back off and walk away. Well, that's what I'm talking about. You got to face the fear, keep moving forward into the energy field, and you will watch a miracle take place. All that stuff flakes off like it never existed. And then the divine self keeps opening underneath it.
What a beautiful image.
Yeah.
It really is.
Well, it's really true.
And, you know, unfortunately, we're out of time now in exploring this wonderful subject, but you have also, in these last words, Don, helped to bring forth an important image that I would like people to really get, which is that because of where we are in, essentially, cosmic history,
Yes.
Astronomy shows us the relationship of planets and the movements in our solar system. And what's happening is that the quality of movement and of what's moving, like the Venus transit coming up, for instance, as an example, is bringing energy of different forms of light, love, beauty, truth, etc., that we're being subjected to, and it helps us clear and clean and cleanse. Or if we resist, we lead that life.
Yes, we lead that old world life.
I want to just thank you so much for being a guest on the show.
Thank you for having me.
You're a gem, and I love the work.
So are you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Mitchell.
Absolutely.
It's a delight to be here.
That was Don Hanson doing beautiful work, internationally acclaimed healer, and now I think you know why. Thanks so much for joining us. This is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World, and we look forward to seeing you next week.